And now on Speak on Stage, it's a complete honor to introduce to you a gentleman who is not only a great friend, but one of the world's foremost thought leaders on the emotional source code. He's a brilliant author, smart entrepreneur, and he's also the mentor and coach of some of the biggest hitters in industry, whether you're talking about Hollywood, you're talking about Silicon Valley, or you're talking about countrywide politicians. They all come and talk to Dov Baron. He's the host of the Dov Baron Show, which is also the number one Fortune 500 company's go-to podcast. He's going to share some stuff that will blow your mind, but he's also one of the funniest guys I know. Ladies and gents, welcome to Speak on Stage, the incredible Dov Baron. Welcome to Speak on Stage with davecrane, the podcast where we unpack the art and science of public speaking to help you command the stage with confidence and authority. I'm your host, davecrane, and as a seasoned speaker, coach, and entertainer, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals like you to unlock their true potential on stage all around the world. Each week, we'll bring you candid conversations with industry experts, successful speakers, and thought leaders, delving into proven strategies, practical tips, and personal anecdotes to empower you to become a captivating communicator. So whether you're a seasoned pro looking to refine your skills, or a beginner taking your first steps onto the stage, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering the craft of public speaking. So grab your notepad, open your mind, and get ready to amplify your impact as we embark on this journey together. Welcome to Speak on Stage with davecrane. Together, let's jump and grow wings on the way down. Welcome to the show, Dov Baron. How are you, sir?
I'm good, mate. It's good to be with you. Always enjoy our chats. And little do they know the stuff that goes on in the background before we hit record.
Anybody, nothing apart from I've recorded it all. I'm going to share it later on. No, I won't.
Right.
Here's the thing: we first connected during the pandemic, and we were doing. It was when I was doing a turbocharge. No, it wasn't turbo. It was the Toilet Paper Diaries with Ernesto Verdugo, and you came on as a guest, and just an incredible guest, and shared lots of stuff all about how to get through the challenges of the pandemic, and also what will be left of us. And you and I have been in contact many times and recorded many sessions, which I've enjoyed and loved as well. What would you say the world is like now, 3 years after the pandemic has kind of cleared? Do you think it has cleared? Do you think people are still wounded? Do you think that people are in denial? What's your experience?
That's a great question. And it's one that's often ignored. During the pandemic, as we talked about, everybody was rushing to get back to normal. And I warned everybody, there is no normal. It's over. It's done. And people would say things like, well, I guess we'll have a new normal. And we'll get used to it. Like, no, that's not going to happen either. And they go, well, what will happen? First of all, you have to think about it this way. I always like this analogy. Think about a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. It doesn't go to sleep as a caterpillar and wake up as a butterfly the next minute. No, there's a period of time where it's wrapped in a cocoon and its flesh dissolves. It becomes, quote my word, soup. It's just like if you cut it open, it would look like soup in there. So it's a gooey mess where the cells are rearranging and redeveloping into something completely and totally different. But here's what's interesting about it. At a biological level, we know that the cells of the caterpillar resist changing into the butterfly. They resist it. Now, if you go to the gym and you want to get stronger, what do you have to do? You have to do resistance training. It is the pushing against something, the resistance to it, that makes us stronger. But if we're pushed against too much, we get injured, and that's a trauma. Well, we got pushed against too much with the pandemic, and we got trauma. Now, will it make some people much stronger? Yes. And a lot of people are saying, well, I'm much stronger now. Yeah, a lot of them are full of stuff. They're full of stuff because it's an act. They don't even know they're acting. So when we go through a great deal of loss, And that loss can be anything that we perceived as normal. There is grief and there is trauma. So to answer your question, that's a backstory to it. To answer your question, are we over it? Absolutely not. Because now we're in what I call the psychological meta crisis, and which is actually even worse. So yes, we're free to wander around and we can go shopping and you go hang out with your friends, but we're in a psychological meta crisis.
Don't stop there. Keep going. What does that mean, and how do we get out of it? I want to be a butterfly, Dov. Stop this.
So, as I'm sure you are aware, there is a war in the Ukraine. There is a war in the Gaza Strip. There is earthquakes happening in Taiwan and different parts of the world. The rise of authoritarian leadership, which I talked about during the pandemic, is happening. There is a food crisis. Farmers are on strike around the world. There is an energy crisis as we're supposed to get to, quote, net zero. On top of that, there is massive conspiracy theories about things like the World Economic Forum and a bunch of other people. There are so many crises happening, and I'm just skimming the surface there. Then we add to that the epidemic of loneliness and addiction and a housing crisis that is happening around the world. Again, post-pandemic, you now have a psychological meta crisis, meaning there are too many crises to cope with. And because of that, everybody is pushed back into the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that deals with threat. And people are living in a threat state. So they're going out like they're free and they're having a couple of drinks and hanging out with their buddies, but they don't understand why are they anxious. Well, this is why you're anxious. Now, what's adding to it is you're online looking at the news feeds that are telling you the world's going to hell in a handbasket. It's not helping. So if you don't take care of your psychological, emotional health, you're not going to flourish. It's just not possible.
That's fascinating. Is that why we're seeing such a rise of authoritarian leaders who are basically turning around and saying, I know the way, and shouting at people, and people are going, okay, you look like you've got more ideas than I have. Can I follow you? Because it's not in most people's natural nature to go in that direction, but the kind of wounded and hoping that somebody, by evidence of having more than they have got their act together. And for somebody like you or me that studies a lot of these big guys, they haven't got their act together. They've just got more money and more power than most people.
I don't know if they have more power. I think that they get more power by having a bigger voice. So if we look at the polarization of the United States, which is, on every news feed there is in the world, what it looks like is America's on the brink of a civil war. That's what it looks like. But what we know is from the research that those extreme polarized people equal about 17% of the population. 17. They're a very small minority, but they are freaking loud. They are very loud and they scream for attention and they get it. So that becomes the narrative rather than the truth. So we're living our lives in a place of narrative rather than in truth. So when you get an authoritarian leader who comes along, who steals the narrative, people will go along with that. Now, to address what you're just saying, we have to think about this in a more complex way. And that is this, these leaders, I am the way, I'm the truth. It's the second coming of Jesus, whether he's got hair like a bag of straw or whether, it's in Turkey or, whether it's in Hungary or whatever it is, these rises happening. So I'll give you the really great research I did on it, which I've done some large research, but this was very much a profound conversation that I had that really made me realize it. I have a client, she was coming on as a new client who lives in Turkey. She's American. And I said, I've always wanted to go to Turkey. I've never been to Turkey. I have heard wonderful things about Turkish people and about the place. And I'm very interested in old cultures. And I said, it sounds great, but I don't know how you live there. as an American, I don't know how you live in Turkey. And she goes, what do you mean? I go, well, it's an authoritarian state. There's no doubt about that. And I said, it may be fairly beneficent, but it's still an authoritarian state. And she answered me in almost an identical way to my friend who I spoke to who lives in Hungary. Now we know Hungary also has an authoritarian leader, and my friend who lives in Hungary is an ex-Marine, so American military. And I said, "How do you like living in Hungary?" And he said, "I love it." And I said, what about the leader? What about this?" And he gets it. They both had the same answer. Yeah, but it's not like that. What do you mean? It's stable. Now, if you look at the emotional source code of America, the country, we've talked about this before, the word you would use, it's the absolute core of that nation. It's not something they came up with last week. It's been there since the beginning. It's the word freedom. Yeah. Therefore, every American is indoctrinated with freedom. When Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream," we call it the "I have a dream" speech, but the word freedom was used way more times than the word dream. Freedom is in the emotional source code. So I said to both of these Americans, "What about your freedom?" And they said, "We have stability." So people are trading freedom for stability. And if somebody is promising stability in an authoritarian manner, we'll keep out the immigrants, we'll get rid of this, we'll get rid of that. We found the enemy and we'll get stability and we'll grow from there. It's a rhetoric that has always worked. It worked with the Romans, it worked with the Nazis, and it's still working today. If you create enough instability with this mega crisis I'm talking about, it's a perfect breeding ground for authoritarian leaders to say, I can stabilize things. Now, let's remember, Adolf Hitler was voted in, and let's remember, Germany was in a massive economic decline when he was brought in. It owed billions to the banks, and he came in and said, it's the banks that are stealing from us. I'll get rid of the banks. Guess what? He did. He got rid of the banks, so the Rothschild banks and all the big banks, and got rid of all of them, stabilized the economy of Germany, made it start to grow, put people back to work, and they started to flourish. This is within 2 years. Then what happened is he went to Austria and said, this is what we did. They were struggling so hard that they said, well, if you want to join with us, with Germany, we'll get rid of the banks. Austria did the same. That's how Austria ended up as part of the German regime. So it's this promise of stability when there's a mega crisis that allows the authoritarian to flourish. And that's because we abandon ourselves, we abandon our freedom in this mindset of there's got to be a somebody, there's got to be a common enemy. And human beings, because of oxytocin in our brain, which is the bonding hormone, love to be in a tribe. So that's the deeper philosophical answer you probably weren't expecting.
I wasn't, but that's a fascinating explanation, and it makes perfect sense because we are trained to push enemies out. I mean, when you look at the bottom line in something like racism, for instance, it's because we are, from going back to being hunter-gatherers, we wanted to be able to spot somebody who's not part of our tribe, because the odds are they're going to attack our tribe. So it stands out and it gets in your head, that person's not right. Now we've got a different world where we embrace it in most cases, and it's fantastic, and you learn diversity and all the rest of it, but it's deep built into us, it's hard coded into us to spot differences and be wary of them, because you never know what that's going to do to the comfort zone that you've created or you're wanting to create for yourself and your family. So
you're absolutely right. It's primal psychology. And as I said to you, so I give another analogy. Sorry, I'm going back to the Nazis, but it's a good way for people to understand it. I want you to imagine a soldier working at Auschwitz, right? And he's, this is like none of us, I think, would be signing up for that job, right? And he comes home from work at the end of the day, and he's met by his wife and his little kids who are happy to see him. And he's a good dad, and he plays with his kids, and his wife says, "How was your day, dear?" And he goes, "It was good, you know, it was a tough day. There was a lot to do, but I met all the logistics I was supposed to meet. I got all the right people sorted out, separated. I got them the ones into the chambers and other people into the workforce, and I got it all done." She goes, "Oh, I'm proud of you. You're a good working man. You take care of your family." And then you go, "Well, is this some kind of psychopath that he could see these people in that way as just fodder that were just part of his workday?" No, that's oxytocin, the same hormone in the brain that allows a person to bond with those in their tribe is the same hormone that allows us to make somebody other than us. And once we can other them, we can dehumanize them. That's why when you and I talked about it before, when I went to Iran and I spoke in Iran in 2015 and I came back, I wrote a long article on the myths of Iran that Americans have about Iran, because I said, you think it's hot. It's not hot. I'm there in February, it's snowing, and my hotel is on the back of a ski hill. You think people are running around on camels, you know, in all kinds of weird outfits. And here's the truth. In the city, there are people taking their kids to school and people driving each other to work, and everything is normal. It's, you know, they're not other than you. They're just like you. So before you decide that it's okay to go bomb a country, you should probably see that they are humans like you. And that was my reason, is because it's very easy for us, any of us, doesn't matter what nation you are, to other another nation. Right? We're seeing that with Israel and Gaza. We're seeing that with the Ukraine and Russia. I mean, Ukraine and Russia, these people don't know themselves separately. Right? Many of them are like, they've got family on the other side. But it's this othering that allows us to do that. And it's, yes, it's built. You're absolutely right, Dave. It's built in at a biological level. It's primal psychology. We are destined to be that way. But we have to rise above that and go, hold on a second. Here's this dude with a weird hairdo sitting in some country that's millions of miles away from me, right? Who comes from the white rose and I'm from the red rose, and I should dislike that guy, besides the fact that he doesn't support the same footy team as I did when I was a kid, and he's a different color, clearly is the enemy, is just ludicrous. Is just absolutely insane. But that's because I can think outside of my primal psychology. But under stress, write this down if you're listening. Under stress, we regress. Under stress, we regress. And you, me, we must take responsibility for that. If we're behaving in a primal psychology way, we've regressed. So if I want to other, I've regressed.
That's fascinating. I remember my dad used to say to me that we're 3 meals away from becoming savages. You miss 3 meals, and everything that got civilization in it has been thrown out the window. You will do anything to get that meal. Just miss 3 meals. Any human being, that's when it all changes. And
I would say now that instead of it being 3 meals, it's a downing of the internet.
That's true.
Just stop the internet for 3 days, and you will see tribal craziness. In the first day, all the supermarkets and clothing stores and TV stores will be, electronic stores will be raided. Then people will realize you can't do anything with the electronics by the second day, because they bought it thinking it's coming, stole it thinking it's coming back. Second day it doesn't come back. They're like, okay. By the third day, they're stealing gasoline to drive their vehicles. But the end of that third day, you've got tribal war. You got tribal war. Like, my neighborhood will be against your neighborhood, which is 2 streets over. It will be that big. If I'm in a high rise, everybody in this building will either come together or we'll just rip each other apart. We're just 3 days without internet. Because without internet, the trucks stop. There's no more food delivery. We are so dependent on the grid that we're to use a term that you and I are familiar with, we're bollocksed.
I hear you, and I accept what you've just said. But here's the thing: we actually have got real wars going on, which you've mentioned earlier. The one that's
Mhm.
going on in Gaza, the one that's going on in Ukraine. And I want to make a point of saying that you and I have been friends for many years. We're not taking sides. We're not pointing out anything politically. We're looking at a helicopter view of the subjects that we're talking about. But those
No,
places.
this is so. Please understand, none of this is partisan. It's the exact opposite of partisan. It's understanding humanity. This is not I'm pro Ukraine or I'm pro Russia or I'm pro Palestinian or I'm pro Israel. I'm pro human. I'm pro human and I'm pro elevated human, meaning we need to lift ourselves up to behave in ways that are better, to treat each other with a lot more grace and empathy and compassion and understand. Like I said, I went to Iran. There was a quote, "the enemy of America," which is just ludicrous, and they were the most beautiful, kind, generous, loving people.
I've got some amazing Iranian friends,
Right?
lovely, gorgeous people, gorgeous people.
Yeah.
But I was going to say something when you jumped in there, so I'm going to
Sorry,
continue on.
mate.
I've almost forgot what it was. So we're talking about all these different places. So the reason I mentioned those two different places, which have got war zones at the moment of the broadcast we're making right now, is that they have gone without internet. And so, is it because there was a bigger threat outside that they got together, or why have they erupted into tribal war against each other?
I think in many ways that is what always happens with an invading state. They
Yeah.
hope to create that. They hope to create internal battles between the local people. And as a friend of mine, John, who is an urban warfare advisor, who went into the Ukraine, what he showed was that they unified as a nation through urban warfare against a common enemy. It's the common enemy. And this is what I was saying before about the authoritarians. Create a common enemy. They find a common enemy and they just keep saying, this is the enemy, this is the enemy, this is the enemy. And as a result, people will come together against the common enemy. And that's the whole idea of the polarization, right? They're trying to create the tribal war between the blue hats and the red hats. It's the same thing. It's just how do we create this common enemy? And what we've got to say is, no, where is the common ground, not the common enemy? Because I can sit you down with anyone. If I say to some, let's use some labels for a minute. I sit somebody down who is a um, card carrying hardcore lefty, and I sit them down behind a screen to talk to this other guy, and I say, I want you to find out about this guy. So okay, so I say to the lefty, "Are you a vegan?" Yes. So I say to the other person, "Are you a vegan?" Yes. Do you love animals? Yes. Do you love animals? Yes. Do you think it's important for us to feed our creativity? Yes. That we should be more artistic and more less intellectual? Yes. And I say, would you like hardcore lefty? Would you like to meet the person behind the screen? And they go, yes. Seems like a lovely person. And I introduce them to Adolf Hitler, who loved animals, who was a vegan, who was an artist. You know, there's more to people than just what's on the surface, right? And so we have to look at people holistically. We have to be willing to see more of them, right? It's not saying that somebody's good or bad, but they have traits and that we are responsible for our own. Like I said before, we have a primal psychology, but we also have to make a commitment to not stay stuck in that. Under stress, we regress. Okay, so what are you going to do now? How are you going to be now?
Now, the challenge that I think with this, I mean, you have the number one podcast for Fortune 500 companies, the Dov Baron Show, and
Mm-hmm.
I love what you do. You're an incredible speaker, incredible author, thought leader, genius when it comes to emotional source code. Everything we talked about there is completely true. I find it really difficult when we have these incredible conversations, which I love, to be able to put my finger on how do we snap it back? Because the thing is, if we ever snap it back, I don't know if it ever has been snapped back. I felt the world was going in a better place. and it just clearly hasn't. I don't know if that's because I'm getting older, I'm more naive, but one of the things that comes from all this is I realized that the two things that go viral on social media are things that make you angry and things that make you laugh. The things that make you nice and loving and caring and bonding and making the world a better place don't go viral. So that 70% of really cool, lovely, come into my house, let me make you dinner, I'm not going to eat you, meet my cat type people just don't have a voice. And I don't think it's built into them to have a voice because they're comfortable, like you said earlier about the Auschwitz soldier. If your world's all right, you kind of just go, I'm all right.
Yeah, we're very selfish. It's like, well, my world's fine. So yes, that's absolutely true. My world's fine. But you say, how do we snap it back? Well, probably not going to like my answer. There's no back. You can't make America great again because it wasn't. That's a fantasy. So these are fantasies we've held probably from a time when things were good for us, right? If you want to make America great again, and it means like let's increase racism, that means it was good for you when it was racist, right? So, what is back? There is no back. Evolution doesn't go backwards, it moves forwards. We evolve forwards. And what I believe is, as hyperbolic as things tend to be these days, it's important to realize that you have a daughter, right, Dave?
Yep.
Yeah. Um, I'm sure your wife's opinion of it might be different than yours, but let's just go with this for a minute. If I ask your wife what pregnancy was like, she will tell me. Okay. She'll talk about the excitement about what was coming, and she'll tell me also about the fact that she had to pee every 15 seconds and the discomfort of trying to lie in bed or tie her shoelaces or whatever it might be.
And it's not
And
Dave's kid.
then, sorry,
And it's not Dave's kid. No, I'm joking. You shouldn't say that. Go on, carry on.
there's that too, right? Right. And then on top of that comes the moment before birth and the water breaks. And now there is panic and anxiety and possibility. And then what comes directly after that? Extreme pain, where she's holding your hand, cursing you for putting this thing inside of her that she wants out, but she doesn't want to get it out because it's so damn painful. She's in bloody agony, and this thing that is she's about to give birth to is ripping her apart quite literally. And then she gets to birth the baby, and all that screaming pain emotion turns into pure, unadulterated love. We're giving birth to a new world.
Wow. Well, I remember when Maya was born, my wife had me in a headlock. So I was in almost as much pain as her. She's like that, and I'm going, but I didn't move her arm for obvious reasons. I wasn't strong enough. So with that, I mean, we're talking about a lot of stuff here, and I wasn't intending necessarily for our direction to go in this way, but this is the thing about it, it just happens. I wanted to go then. So we're birthing a new world, but we're birthing a new world all the time. And
Of course.
I remember a stand-up comedian, I can't remember if it was Louis C.K. or somebody talking about if you had a time machine show and you were able to send black people back in time, nobody would say beyond the 1940s. I don't want to go beyond that. I don't want to go before that. Why? Because it was so bad. Whereas if you were white, it was a completely different choice. You can go back to any time in history and you can fit in and so on. And so I was hoping in my lifetime I would see a much more comfortable, much more settled, much more beautiful world for people of color, of diversity, of different gender choices, of physical abilities to go into. In some ways, I do, but I also hear a lot more noise from those who are fighting resistant to stop it being a norm. Would you say that's the world we're moving into, or is that just a transition like our butterfly friend?
I think that that's a different metaphor in that that's the polarization, and what I mean by that is there's a pendulum and it swings from one side to the other. So as you know, Dave, because we've had conversations about it, I got friends of every possible color, and I'm married to a person of color. I grew up and hung around with people of color all my life, and I hung around with gay people when I was a kid, and still have gay friends, and I don't give a hoop what you are; it's irrelevant to me. I think that nonetheless, even supporting all that, things can get extreme. So, and so many of the people who, and you and I had this conversation in a previous interview, many of the people who invaded the Capitol on January the 6th were not nutters. We like to look at them and think, oh, they were all crazy. No, they weren't. Some of them were definitely crazy. But if you go down the supermarket, you'll find some crazies there too. If you go to church, you'll find some crazies there. You'll find crazies anywhere you get a crowd. Were the majority of them crazy? No. Were there a significant amount of crazies? Sure. But most of the people were there because there was something that mattered enough to them. There was meaning. But if meaning is not managed and put through a filter, then it becomes irrational. It becomes crazy. So when you're fighting for diversity, I'm with you. When you want to attack people through diversity, I'm against it. I'm not with that. When you want to fight for people of color having rights, I'm with you all the way. When you now want to make everything about cultural appropriation, I'm not with you anymore. It's gone extreme. I'm not interested. So the key is the centerpiece. We have to come back to being human. We are not even human. We're earthlings. We're all earthlings. We share the planet with millions of other species, let alone other races, and we need to treat each other with a level of respect around that, rather than constantly looking for an enemy. So when you say you'd like to think that we're going to, have a better world, comfort is the enemy. I want you to know that. As a thought leader or somebody in my space, I'm constantly confronting the leaders I work with and say, get off this addiction you have to comfort. You're mainlining comfort, and it will kill you like any other addiction. Human beings do not grow in comfort. We grow in resistance. That's important to us. We need that. It pushes us. It makes us curious. It makes us explorative. We've got to get into that place. What does that mean? It means embrace the discomfort, because when you do, that's when the transformation takes place. Every company, as some of your viewers who are watching or listening right now, are probably in the tech space. And the tech space is all about what word? Innovation. But very few companies are innovating. Very few companies have innovated since Apple. And Apple don't even innovate anymore. And people go, how can you say that? Because it's true. Well, what do you mean, Dov? Okay, let me give you an example. When Steve Jobs walked out with the iPod, he talked about, here's your albums, here's your stack of albums, here's all your vinyl, Now, what would happen if you could keep 1,000 tunes in this thing the size of a matchbox on you? We were like, wow, that was innovation. Now, what happened to all the vinyl? What happened to all the CDs and the tapes? They all got thrown in the dump. That's what innovation is. Innovation is a destructive process. It must destroy in order for something else to come along. Anything else is a tweak. And what we're actually saying is we want innovation, but could you just make it so it's only a tweak? That doesn't work that way. That's like saying, I'd like to be pregnant without birthing, but I'd like to have the baby. Well, the birthing part is painful, bloody painful. And you might be having a screaming abdabs as you do it, but it's the only way you get the baby. It's the only way you get the baby. We are in that time. We are in that time. And as my buddy Mark says, in many ways, this is the chaos before the dawn. This is the craziness before the peace. In that we have a choice, which is we keep this up as a cycle. We keep rerunning this warring cycle, and it's not warring in the sense of the Ukraine, although it could be that. it's warring within ourselves, or we move to a state of saying, how do we evolve humanity in a way that's not easy, but is better? How do we birth this within ourselves?
There's an example of this, which I've got to say I was hoping would come a lot faster in the world. Not this conversation's fascinating as always, which is the Renaissance came after the Great Plague.
Absolutely.
When everybody was in lockdown, people were dying, everyone was just at the worst that humanity had seen. And what came out of it was this just incredible art and music and love and fashion and all these elements. Is that where we're heading? Do you see that on the horizon? Or is it not going to happen in our meager lifetime? But in 30 years, Dave, you'll love it if you're still here.
I've written a lot about the new Renaissance. That you can actually find articles I've written on this, that we are at the opening of a new Renaissance. There's no doubt about that. The plague was still happening when Leonardo da Vinci was alive, and Michelangelo. So yeah, those things did come out of that. But the Renaissance itself, people tend to think of it was the Black Plague and then it was the Renaissance. No, hold on. Whoa, nice thought, buddy. That's not how it works. That Renaissance took about 120 years. Took 120 years to take off, right? It was seeded by Michelangelo. It was seeded by Leonardo da Vinci and others. But it actually took about 120 years, right? So coming from the plague, let's call that COVID, you might have to count for a while. So are you and I going to see it? Well, there's a lot of longevity stuff going on, and maybe with the right hormones and stuff. But I have healthy concern for the impact of what's going on my grandchildren. Of course I do. Do I have hope for humanity? Yes, I have hope for humanity because I believe that we are an evolving species. Do you remember James Burke, Connections? Do you remember that show when we were a kid?
Yeah.
I spent some time with James Burke, who was amazing in his 80s, right? Wow. The Connections was the show that lit me up, right, when I was a kid. And James said he believes that we're evolving into something beyond human. And I said, is that interface with machines, or are you talking at a metaphysical level? And he said, yes.
He's not far off. When we're talking about that art and we're talking about 120 years, the odds are, Dov, you and I will not be talking about we're in the middle of Renaissance. How are you? You look like the cast of Thriller. I mean, we don't look far off that now. But what about AI? AI is speeding that process faster than anything I can remember during my entire lifetime. The odds are that we will see that Renaissance, that art, that wonderful that new civilization that pops up faster, and maybe even in the next 30 years, because we don't have to wait 120. Is that realistic, do you think?
I think it's a great point. It's an absolutely great point. But again, AI is a destructive process because it's innovative. So people are on either side of that. They're like, oh, I'm so excited about what AI is going to do, or I'm terrified about what AI is going to do. They seem to be in one of two camps. And the truth is, you should be both. You should be very excited and terrified. So part of it is one of my clients works with helping AI companies build the guardrails, right? Because there's no guardrails. This thing's just gone wackadoo. It's the Wild West. And the problem is, it's a Wild West that could, destroy us if we're not careful. So because it's learning at exponential speed to a singularity where it would be far more intelligent than any human on the planet. And then within 10 years, it may be more intelligent than all the humans on the planet. So that is very exciting and terrifying. It's both. It's innovation. Innovation is a destructive process. So what do we have to do? We have to put guardrails in to say, okay, here's how you're building compassion. Here's how you're building empathy. Here's how you're building those things. Will it speed everything up? Yes. So does 120 years become 30? Yes. Maybe it becomes 10. It's entirely possible that we'll get to see that. You see, here's another example. If AI becomes the enemy, do we come together or do we tribalize and go against each other? You know, if we're the Ukraine and we build urban warfare, we come together and it's the Terminator show. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to play this out. And I'm not meaning to be dark or desperate for people. What I'm trying to have you understand is you get to decide the future. You think you're not important. You think you don't have a voice. But hold on a second. 17% of Americans now control the narrative for the other 83%. Most of Americans have no interest in this polarization. They don't give a crap about it all. That's not who they are. They're my friends. I hang out with them. They don't care about this extreme left or extreme right. They're not supporting Trump or Biden. They're actually looking for some sanity that is humanity based, right? So depends on where you are in the world. It doesn't matter. You have a voice and you have to make your voice heard. So if we suddenly all flood the internet with here's why I believe in humans, like here's my challenge to you. I don't know who you are, don't know where you are, don't know whether you write tweets or you do Instagram things or you write articles or you do little videos or whatever it is. My challenge to you is in the next 30 days to produce 3 pieces of content, even tweets, that are titled, Here's Why I Believe in Humanity. Let's flood the internet with that and watch the tides change, because Meta, which is Facebook, and all those other companies will always make the algorithm rule. If the algorithm just keeps seeing, here's why I believe in humanity, that's what will get pushed out there. And that will get pushed out more and more. And then other, quote, influencers will jump on board and do more of that. Right now, as Dave said earlier on, people are jumping on hate. They're jumping on anger and stupid cat videos. Yeah, because that's a distraction. So the algorithm is going to feed, it's just like AI. People are worried about AI, but remember, we're teaching AI. If we lack emotional intelligence, if we lack humanity, if we lack compassion, why wouldn't it? You don't look at the kid and go, you know, you're a horrible child without going, well, hold on a minute. Your dad's a racist, violating abuser, and you grew up in that. Of course you are. That's all you know. Well, that's AI. We're teaching it how we are. That's the algorithm. We're teaching it how we are. So we have to say, you know, here's why I believe in humanity. Here's why I believe in our future. Here's what we're capable of. Here's where we look like we were stuck in the dark age and we were never going to get out of it. But this happened and we took it on and somebody transformed the world. You can be that person. There's a lot of us. There's 8 billion of us who can make a difference in the world against a minority.
I'm not
Dave's
crying
weeping
because
as we speak.
I'm not crying because of that beautiful speech. I'm doing it because these lights that we talked about at the beginning are really in my eyes. I'm gonna pick you up on something you said there, and I love what you shared. But I think that the biggest test of what you just said there about putting out those tweets about humanity happened during the beginning of the pandemic. We all got scared. We all reached out. We all wanted everybody to check on their neighbors to see if they're safe. And then
Yep.
something happened. Maybe 2 months into it, people then went, I'm all right, Jack. I don't care anymore. They stopped being so scared. They started getting back to normal and they lost their empathy. I'm not saying everybody did. Some
No.
of us are still very much in that zone where I mean, for me, I have lost my massive interest in capitalism. I'm more than happy just to let days go by and have fun on the way to the end of my days, because I'm not driven by the got to keep running, got to keep running. And for me, that's been a godsend to have that. But the thought experiment you're talking about was a worldwide pandemic, and it only lasted for about 2 months. Does that fit in? Does that make sense with what you just
Makes
shared?
perfect sense, Dave. It's exactly what I was saying earlier, is that people are very addicted to comfort. So when they get comfortable with this fact that, yeah, I'm at home, but I don't have to go to work anymore. I'm at home and I'm watching Netflix and you know, my kids are fine and my wife's fine, so my husband's fine, so it's all good. Right? This is why I said that discomfort is good for us. It's important for us. Comfort is the enemy. Comfort is the addiction that allows us to other, right? So we other in extreme discomfort and extreme comfort. That's when we other. Don't threaten my comfort. Don't threaten my good stuff, right? And I'll build you up as a potential threat. That way you'll follow this authoritarian leader. That's one way. Or the other way is, it doesn't matter. Extreme on either side will create that. It's an addiction to comfort, as opposed to, hold on, my comfort is important, of course. I'm a human. But what if I gave a poop about the comfort of everybody? What if I said, I don't need everybody to live in a palace, but I need everyone to have a humanity level of living, where they have running water, running clean water, where they have clean water to drink, where they have safety, where they can walk outside without a fear of being shot or killed or raped or murdered or whatever it is. Like, what if we made sure that no kid goes to bed hungry? Like, let's take a look at that. And I think that that's what I'm saying about us birthing a new reality. That's where I do believe we're going to. This is the storm before the calm. This is where we're at right now. It is the birth. It's the beginning of the birth, and it's bloody painful. And we can come together, even if our wife puts us in a headlock to do it. But we can come together to serve each other and have a better understanding of the difference we can make. It's vitally important.
I love that. I love everything you've shared. I'm going to throw in one last question now, which is when we deal with, I mean, we're both mentor, we both coach, we work with thought leaders, CEOs, decision makers around the world, helping them to grow their brand, their business, and their way of looking forward. What is the common ground that you find that is the biggest mistake for decision makers that they really need to get over themselves to be able to then get a revelation in the results that they really need? Because we're still on a path to make money, and there's nothing wrong with making money, but it's almost at the expense of humanity in many cases. And as they burn up, there's a phrase that was shared with me before, and to illustrate this, and I'm paraphrasing it, your heroes that you admire also ignored their families, also ignored parts of their humanity to become as big as they are in what they did. They're not really your heroes, but they're the ones that achieved most in that particular industry by doing all the stuff that you won't do. Does
So
that make
I think what you're saying is vitally important, and that's the dichotomy, Dave, because we live in a capitalist world that is hustle, hustle, hustle. And a lot of people, got to re-examine that as a value system because of the pandemic, which is the good thing, right? They're like, why the hell am I working 70 hours a week and not seeing my kids? That's crazy. And why am I driving an hour to work and an hour home? That's crazy. And I'm just trying to get a bigger car and a better home. Like, I'm never in my home, and the car I only use to go to work. So why am I doing this? Prestige? I don't know. And so the value systems got questioned, and that is fantastic, really important. Now, as we've quote moved back towards normal, not true, but within the concept of normal, then that desire, that impetus towards hustle is coming back, but it's still not, it's certainly not where it was. And that many people who live in the Western world are going, I don't know that I give a shit that much anymore about all those things. That is vitally important. Where companies are making mistakes is in, and as you know, I work with very big entrepreneurs, very big CEOs, even political or even entertainment people. And there's this desire to want things back to normal so that they can continue their path. And what that means is now they're saying, well, we need you to come back to the office 5 days a week. And I'm saying to them, then you might as well just pack up now and say goodbye. Right. So we now know that companies have been holding on to their real estate for their offices that are 20% full, and they've been holding on to the fullness, waiting for people to come back. They're not coming back. They're not coming back. So they said to me, so what do we do? I said, listen, you got to understand. If you want to keep the space, that's fine. You don't want to keep the space, that's fine. Whatever you decide, that's fine. But you need to understand what's missing. So what's missing? Meaning. Human beings are meaning-driven machines. We want meaning. Now I don't just want a paycheck, I want meaning. I want to know that what I'm doing matters. That's number one. So I'm not coming for a paycheck anymore. I can get that anywhere. What else do I want? I want community. I realized how much I missed community when I was in the lockdown in the pandemic. That made it real for me. And it made me realize that I didn't have community even when I wasn't on lockdown. I just had workmates and barely that. So what does this mean? It means you must be a purpose-driven organization. And your people have to know what that purpose is and you have to create full buy-in from them. And second of all, you have to create a community in your organization. And by that, I'm not talking about bloody beanbags and coffee machines. I'm talking about genuine community where you are building community for people, with people, and allowing them to come along with that. What does that mean? It means this: if you're going to keep the space, don't keep the space as a workspace. What? If you want people to come in, have them come in for community so that when they go to work for you from home, they're actually producing because this is part of their community. So, we have non-work days. So if you can log them in and you come in and you're in the office and there's a space for you to work if you want to work, but if you don't want to work and you just want to hang out with the people who are in the community area, you're building that community. Because now what millennials have been trying to scream at us, I wrote about this in 2015, is they've been screaming at us is that they don't want work-life balance. They want work-life blend. They want to work with their friends. If you've not created a community, why the hell would they come in? They're not coming in. Stop trying to get back to normal and understand that you have to create a culture of belonging. Vital. Culture of belonging. I have a course called Creating Cultures of Belonging. You can find it at coursifyx.com/belonging, because this is what we need to do. But you can't really create that unless you understand how to belong to yourself. And you can't do that without self-knowledge, without compassion, without empathy. So all those things have to come together. That's what makes the difference.
Wow. And you're absolutely right. And in many ways, I think the generation that we're talking about who are in control have to get out of the way. Maybe they won't change. Maybe they won't understand. Natural selection will mean at some point they won't be making those decisions, even though I often see them being well past their sell-by date, because the next generation does not want that. But we live in hope, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be looking after us. If we treat them right, then hopefully they'll kind of treat us right when they're in charge of everything.
Yeah, as a very famous quantum physicist from the Copenhagen retreat said, sometimes you just have to wait for the old people to die for things to change. Right?
On that happy note, looking at our grey hair and our wonderful conversations as always, Dov Baron, there's no accident that you're seen as one of the world's top speakers, authors, thought leaders, and you're the host of the world's #1 Fortune 500 podcast, The Dov Baron Show. I look forward to our future conversations. It's been an honor and a pleasure catching up after such a long time. It seems mad. And stay curious makes more sense than ever before once we've had these conversations. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. I really appreciate it. And thank you for you, dear listener, dear viewer, because we know your time and your energy and your commitment, your engagement is valuable. And the fact that you took time to be here and listen to us, watch us is important to us. And I want you to make sure that you let Dave know that you appreciate the fact that he puts these shows together and he brings together the audiences, brings together the guests for you, for the audience. And, it's not a one-way street. Make sure you appreciate him. It's important to do. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I love the way you start my podcast. We're going to have some more amazing people, just like Dov Baron, maybe not quite like Dov Baron, but very different, and lots of new ways for you to learn your positioning, your branding, your speaking, and making the world a better place. Remember to jump and grow wings on the way down, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Speak on Stage. Thank you for tuning into another insightful episode of Speak on Stage with Dave Crane. We hope you found today's conversation inspiring and packed with valuable insights to help you to amplify your presence on stage too. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more aspiring speakers just like yourself. Remember, the stage is your platform to shine, and with the right tools and mindset, you can captivate any audience anywhere. So keep honing your craft, refining your message, and never shy away from the spotlight. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive even deeper into the world of public speaking and performance. Until then, keep speaking, keep shining, and keep making an impact. This is Dave Crane signing off. See you next time on Speak on Stage.